There's a strange feeling that comes with getting into a strongly established multiplayer video game years after its initial release, and in my eyes, one of the top positions on that list belongs to Final Fantasy XIV. The game being an MMO sounds like the open world game from Final Fantasy that the series has been conceptualizing from its very beginning. Though Final Fantasy XI was also an MMO, it's no secret that in Square's eyes, starting with A Realm Reborn, they finally had the world they've always wanted to make. But coming into this video, most would probably be expecting me to go into the game's history and how the reception of the original game was and all that jazz, but if I'm honest, this is not a review of A Realm Reborn. This is a newcomer's look under the lens of A Realm Reborn nearly a decade after its release. So sit back, relax, grab a bag of spicy sweet chili Doritos or something, I don't know, because it's time we dive right into things. But before we begin, I want to thank all my lovely patrons you see on screen right now for making this video possible. But now, without further ado, this is a look under the lens of Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. I scarcely have video games captivate me in the way that A Realm Reborn did. The game is so filled to the brim with lore and world building that honestly I felt that all that I learned would start pouring out of my ears. And to some people that may be a bad thing, but in my eyes, I think it's never possible to have too much world building. It's how a game can execute it that can make things well received or not. Think of it in a perspective of the real world. There is so much to learn about the history of our planet, its development, the cultures throughout the ages, the personal lives of many people throughout history. The process of learning about these things is how you absorb the lore of this world, but as most living beings should know, aka everyone watching this video, actually learning about the intricacies of all of these things are something that most people don't have to do throughout their lives. They're something they choose to do. Some even choose to have the profession to be in this field. The same can go applying for lore and world building in video games. Just because you know there be plenty of people who aren't interested in this sort of thing doesn't mean you exclude it. You need to include these things and let the players decide if they want to learn more and become a part of this world even more so. Of course, this is an objective of the main story as well, which needs to be met, but side content that includes this additional lore and world building should simply reinforce the feeling that this is a world with people who have their own feelings, their own problems, their own lives, and Final Fantasy XIV excels in this area. One thing that took me a few days to really settle on how to approach things was the structure of A Realm Reborn's narrative. The game is long. On the dot, it took me 117 hours of playtime to get to actually finish the story and its patches and actually get to Heavensward. So when a game is over 100 hours long, how do you go about pacing a story-driven MMO this way? This is something I want to tread lightly with because I don't want people to misunderstand what I mean and assume that I don't like this or for some reason like that. I think A Realm Reborn has to tackle inviting people into its world and giving them a reason to care. For many MMOs, most people just skip the story to get to the gameplay so that they can play with their friends. Now I can admit, playing with friends is really fun, but I feel the way the story invites you in, at least in the beginning, feels more personal to one person. You came to Eorzea, you became an adventurer, you got invited to the Scions, and you have the power of the Echo, and of course, you are the Warrior of Light. The game always makes sure to notate that these people are talking to you. Now I know hearing that it's like, well, duh, Jordan, but no, listen here. What I mean by this is that when taking the time to play with friends specifically, it feels less personal when that friend isn't showing up in the cutscenes, because as far as the plot is concerned, they aren't there. Now, where A Realm Reborn really blew me away was in the final battle of the main story before the patches. The other players you're in the duty with show up in the cutscenes with you, and from then on, in the really insane story moments where battles take place and will take place, they mention gathering those friends of yours to rejoin you again for this battle in the story. And of course, with MMO nature of being of this game, the fight pairs you up with players to take on the fight, and I think that is incredible how they incorporate other players into the narrative too. It's canon that the Warrior of Light called upon other friends to help him. Now, I'm not saying A Realm Reborn is the first MMO to do this, because I don't know. As a newcomer, I'm new to this sort of thing. I can't really help but being impressed. But speaking of the narrative, this game for an MMO has a very gripping story. It's got such wonderful characters weaved into the heart of what the writers are trying to say. They have you going on quests, doing favors for people, fighting alongside others, and the gameplay of doing these menial things reinforces that I've been with the Scions for a while and we've worked hard to maintain our neutrality in this land as a team of friends working for what we believe in. I can see that these people were friends and cared about each other even before I got here, so their interactions feel so natural to witness. This is one of my problems with another very popular 100+ hour adventure that I do like, like a lot, despite many people thinking I hate it. In that game, I feel these teammates of mine are not friends with each other. They're friends with me. So when I'm not around, do these people even talk? Hang out? And even if they do, to an extent, it feels like they put being teammates first over being friends. And that's okay for some stories, but I feel that's not my cup of tea, nor do I think it complements that particular story. But back on topic though, A Realm Reborn, despite what many faithful Final Fantasy XIV players will tell you, is more than something you just need to get through. No. There is so much more to it than that. A Realm Reborn isn't just a bridge to cross to get to the good stuff. This is the foundation of a building that will live in the hearts of many people for years to come. So yes, even if the overall narrative of Final Fantasy XIV does get better with each expansion that continues the story, it doesn't make the base game any worse in retrospect. This is still the stepping stone that introduced you to this world, the fundamentals of what made you a resident of this place. It's the foundation of the relationships that have fully blossomed later on. But I also don't want the fact that this is the stepping stone to greater narratives be less of a reason to pay attention to what's going on now. As with most narratives, what happens early on gets referenced later. Think of games like Kingdom Hearts 1. That game mechanically and narratively might not wow you in the way the later games will, but is that any less reason to pay attention to what's going on within? This being a Square game, I promise you the answer is no. And I feel the same applies to Final Fantasy XIV, since all the expansions are the continuation of the previous story, which is why I felt the need to break up this look under the lens of Final Fantasy XIV into different chapters, this one covering solely A Realm Reborn. But going back again, I feel this game being to many people a simple stepping stone doesn't give all the credit that's due for the quality story that's here. And honestly, I feel that comes from a combination of people skipping the story itself, and honestly it having just been years for a lot of people since they directly experienced this story. A very general outline of the story is you're an adventurer from another land, fresh off the boat and ready to make a name for yourself. Getting your way started, you end up doing just that after joining up with a group known as the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, who fight to ensure the safety of Eorzea from the great threat of the primals, the summons and gods from previous and future Final Fantasy games. These primals exist as beings of ether who don't have a physical form but can gain one when consuming the faith of their believers. When fully recognized, they wield extraordinary powers that can destroy the world as they know it, so attempting to prevent these summons is more accurately their prime objective. However, with their neutral stance and wanting to protect all of Eorzea, it can make that objective more complicated and difficult to achieve when not all of the nations stand united and being selfish, only thinking of oneself. Not that I necessarily blame them. When you're the leader of a nation, it's your duty to see that as many of your people are safely defended as possible, even if it means in the end you're the last one standing. Going a layer deeper though, you begin to start realizing how deeply screwed up a lot of these places are. Some not being capable of caring about other nations since they're so focused on how centralized their profession should be, like the pirates of Limsa Lominsa, or how corrupt the government of Ul'dah is throughout the story. The core of their government means well, but that doesn't really add up to anything when they're surrounded by people who care more for lining their own pockets than the well-being of others, and even less so about things like morality. Gridania is a nation that, though isn't my favorite, they have their head on their shoulders the most in my eyes, mainly due to the guilds all working together with one another. The corruption isn't anywhere near what you'll find in Ul'dah, but that in itself is an issue they have to suffer through, mainly because of your allies having a ton of issues makes it so overall less is accomplished each day, so being the only one who's got yourself together makes the rest seem so insufferable. But going back to Ul'dah, despite all those bad things I said about Ul'dah, I still find it being my favorite place of the major city-states to be within. And that's because the main story is deeply rooted into what happens within these walls. Corruptions that run so deep that it goes back further to even before the old organizations such as the local Grand Company, the Immortal Flames, which basically serves as a police force, were even founded. Finding out about how Raubon's second in command had been playing both sides for Ul'dah and their enemies since before the Immortal Flames had even been founded impacted me personally because I had gotten to know Raubon and the kind of person he is, so to see someone so close to him stab him in the back made me feel like I had been betrayed as well. Even more so because earlier on I chose to alliance myself with the Immortal Flames. You could choose the Grand Company of any of the other three major city-states, but Ul'dah meant the most to me even earlier on because it was the nation I started my quest in. So call me biased, but hey, in the end it worked out because a lot of major plot points took place in Ul'dah. But going further, it'd be impossible for me not to mention the game of the patches, so that's what I'm gonna do. I absolutely hate Alegi. Absolute scum this man is, but not just for the obvious reasons. I felt like it was way too strange to have him end up as the villain, as before this, seeing him was more of a pleasure. He was for us taking in the Doma refugees, as he made a compelling argument how, yeah, they may be refugees and we've had issues with refugees in the past and now because of the calamity 5 years ago, but they're willing to work and give back to the economy. If anything, it should have been Lolorito who ended up as the villain, and I know in the end with Raubon serving up to Alegi how Obi-Wan served up Darth Maul in the Phantom Menace, it revealed certain aspects of the situation was orchestrated by Lolorito as expected, but to make them both out as villains just to kill off Alegi felt like a really weak plot point in my eyes, especially since we go in expecting Lolorito to be the one being the villain, just for them to say, nope, you're wrong, and then say, just kidding, you were right all along, kinda just wasn't served right in my eyes. However, I think what made me the angriest, as those who were in the streams know that my microphone destroyed itself when I was screaming because of this, but it was when Alegi put his plan into effect and tried to accuse the Warrior of Light of killing Nanamo, the Sultana of Ul'dah, and all of his scions for conspiring the events behind the scenes and using their power over the Echo to manipulate the minds of people who they wanted to take advantage of, which is just crap because the Echo just lets them see past events and at the very least for our Warrior of Light be immune to the mind manipulation of the primals. But coming back to this now, Alegi coming up to the party with Ishgardian soldiers convincing our new friend Alvis from Xenoblade Chronicles that stuff is going on in Ishgar and they gotta get home, then immediately shaming everyone for partying when the Sultana was getting murdered and the investigation leading to the Warrior of Light having done it, and concluding that the previously stated accusations against the Scions. What I find laughable is how he believes people are gonna, buy this. Homie comes through with all these accusations, having done work to try to fix all this stuff without alerting anyone about anything. So he found the Sultana dead, did a full investigation, enough to conclude who did it without a shadow of a doubt, and gathered enough evidence to prove the Scions were conspiring against her, all within the time frame of the short half an hour the party began, without alerting anyone? There's no way at all this could be the case. He even knows this since he admits having no alibi and having reasoning for wanting to do it if it was him. But despite how angry this scene made me, I absolutely fell in love with it. I love it when media gives you a reason to hate these villains. Making villains relatable and understandable isn't always the best route to take, and it's so overdone nowadays since I feel so many people are scared to make villains too plain and their actions need to be unjustifiable. But that's what makes them villains in the end. A lot of time we don't need to understand their point of view. We don't always need to sympathize with them. As long as we know they have a reason, I feel depending on the execution, it's fine. We can easily tell he doesn't share the same sense of morality as us and is unhinged, willing to do insane things to get what he desires. And I love the simple complexity that comes with this. He's not so downright evil that he'll do it himself. He'll manipulate others to do the dirty work for him, hide behind loopholes in the law so he can't be taken down, paint the good guys in a light that others are blinded by, making it hard for the public to distinguish who's good and who's evil. Man, I can literally go on and on and on and on about so many plot points during this game, but because this game is so long, the more I dwell on each topic, the longer this video will be. And I know according to watch time, not everybody's even gonna make it this far, but I guess to close out, this game is fantastic. I absolutely fell in love with A Realm Reborn, and it's honestly hard to set my sights even higher for Heavensward. I hear a lot of people claim that Heavensward and Shadowbringers are their absolute favorites, so hopefully I can be absolutely blown away by what these expansions hope to accomplish. I know I didn't go fully in depth, but again, that would make this video go on for the length it took me to beat the game, but I feel I went on long enough to show what I found under the lens for A Realm Reborn. I'm super excited for Heavensward. By the time you're watching this, I've likely just got started with it. I may even be streaming it, so if you're into that, make sure you subscribe with the bell notifications turned on so you'll never miss a step of my journey. And of course, when Heavensward is done, you can expect me to take a look at it under the lens too. Again, I just want to give a big shout out to my lovely patrons, so much love to Kodo119, Jaden2602, P. Cody Matt, Dominic, Rose, Genma the Samurai, TM298, Victor M. Aponte Jr., and Gentleman Gamer. Thank each and every one of you so much for watching. My name is KingdomAce, and remember, my warriors of courage, to stay strong, stay beautiful, and always look skyward. Or I guess Heavensward would be more appropriate.